is here with me today. In a few weeks we'll celebrate 11 wonderful years of marriage. On March 30th of this year, my wife had gone out of town for a few days, and I was home alone with our 3 young children. I woke up that morning, got the kids dressed and ready for school like any other day, and buckled them all into the car to take them to their 3 different schools, elementary, nursery, and daycare, before I'd be heading up to my office. We got to our first stop at precisely 8:19 in the morning, just in time for the 8:20 start of the school day. And I pulled over in front of the school to drop off my second grader. I got out of the car to get her something from the trunk. As I stood behind my car, about to open the trunk, I saw this taxi at the end of the block. The taxi came toward me, and I remember thinking it would move over to the next lane. But apparently the driver didn't see that I was standing right in front of him. He collided right into me and plowed into the back of my car, right where I was standing. I remember almost everything. I remember that I was able to control myself falling to the ground as my legs gave out from under me. I was somehow able to lie down on the ground on the spot where my car once was, since it got pumped forward a few feet. And within moments, a few bystanders, including the assistant principal of the school, came to my aid. And they called an ambulance right away, of course. Thankfully, as I learned very quickly, all my children were completely safe and unharmed. The school nurse came to the car to take the kids inside, very careful to shield them so they couldn't see what had happened. And within a matter of minutes, the paramedics were able to take me to the hospital. I knew both of my legs were broken, but I didn't quite know how seriously. And that was on a Friday morning. I woke up Sunday afternoon to the sound of my wife and my brother sitting beside me, repeating those dreaded words, "You've been in an accident." My response to them, "Of course I was, and why are you repeating yourself?" They told me that I'd been through some 14 hours of surgery so far, and I'd be in the hospital for a little while. I guess my wife was able to get back to New York okay, and my brother had also flown in from out of town right after the accident in order to be with me. I should point out he was in Ohio at a conference giving a speech, and by the time I had woken up, he had still not taken off his necktie. The next 3 days actually moved pretty quickly. The next 3 weeks actually moved quickly as well. Every day I was either getting ready for surgery, or was in surgery, or recovering from surgery, and by the time they were done, the doctors had performed 11 surgeries just in those first 3 weeks. Both of my tibia and fibula bones, those are the 2 bones that make up the part of your leg below your knee, had been completely crushed. They were fractured into so many pieces that they didn't bother to count. The doctors amputated my right leg about 4 inches below my knee, and my left leg was partially reconstructed about 11 inches below the knee. All in all, I spent about 2 months in the hospital recovering from my injuries. And yes, the food is as bad as they say it is. My wife and her brother emailed everyone we knew to let them know what had happened and how I was doing. And so many friends and family and people I even barely knew had replied with an outpouring of emails wishing us well. And each asked, "What can I do to help?" And some offered to babysit, and many friends provided home-cooked meals for my family so that my wife could be at my bedside at the hospital. But even then, people still wanted to help. But the bottom line, of course, is that there's not a lot that any of my friends could do. I was surrounded by very talented and wonderful healthcare professionals, doctors and nurses and therapists. So relative to what I was already getting in the hospital, we really didn't need too much. But we did come up with something else to do for our friends who were desperate to help. We asked them to donate blood. You see, in the course of my surgeries, about 70 units of blood had been used by the surgeons to save my life and my legs. I thought, wouldn't it be neat if we could get 70 friends to donate blood? And that way we could replenish the blood supply from what I had used. We felt like 70 donations was a daunting goal, but we were excited by it. An email came in a few days later from a cousin with a photo of him sitting in a chair, that chair you guys all know very well, donating blood. We were so excited. I still remember the emotions I felt. I was humbled that someone would take the time out of his day to do such a thing just because we asked. And I was thrilled that someone else's life could be saved like mine was. And then came a second email, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth. We started to keep track. Maybe we could reach our goal after all. Then the most curious email came to me from a member of my synagogue. They wanted to host a blood drive in my name. But would I mind if they used my name? Would I mind? Really? I was blown away by the honor. And another family member got a blood drive hosted at the JCC in Bridgewater, New Jersey. I was flattered and appreciative. I had to thank these people, many of whom I'll never meet, for taking time out of their day to give blood in my honor. So I wrote a letter, and I asked it to be photocopied and distributed at these 2 blood drives. I told people about the accident, why it was so important to give blood, and I wrote, and here I'm quoting from my own letter here, somewhere out there, 70 people took the time to sit in a donor's chair and give a unit of blood. I'll never know or be able to thank these 70 people who saved my life, but I can thank you. The least I can do is lend my name to the efforts of those who are collecting blood in this blood drive. Then I'll know that I'll have paid it forward to others who may one day need it. I would not have gotten to where I am without donated blood, which is why I, and anyone who's ever received a transfusion, can only say thank you from the bottom of our hearts. I should pause here for a moment just to say at the time I wrote this letter at the end of April, I never dreamed I'd be standing in front of an audience of people who raise blood. And it's quite possible that one of you recruited the very pints of blood that went into my body. So thank you wherever you are, and you can have an extra portion of dessert if you'd like. With these 2 blood drives, and plus the many individual donors, we soon met our goal of 70 units raised. In fact, we doubled it to over 150 units. Many people told us that they had never given blood before, and they were surprised to learn how easy it was. Well, I should pause for a moment to acknowledge and welcome one first-time donor who's here today, my mother, who gave me one of these blood drives. Besides my wife and mother, I also want to welcome my father, who just turned 80 this year. Happy birthday, Dad. And my mother-in-law, who's here as well. She's an EMT, so she sees firsthand how these are much-needed supplies. After these 2 blood drives, well, it didn't stop there. The word spread about how easy it was to do something so meaningful. More friends gave more blood, and amazingly more communities organized blood drives. By the time I left the hospital 2 months after the accident, there were a total of 7 blood drives scheduled in 4 different states. By the time the middle of the summer rolled around, we broke 600 units of blood raised. We exceeded our original goal by almost tenfold. I'm afraid I lost count at that point. We were conservative in the way we counted, so we didn't include the dozens of people who emailed to say, I'm planning on giving. We only counted it once they actually gave. I'm not even counting the few blood drives that were happening anyway, but whose leadership asked if they could use my name or my letter, and I said, go ahead, but I'm not counting them, although I'm sure the New York Blood Center will be happy to accept that blood. In at least 2 cases, an institution that held the blood drive for the first time was so enamored at how effective the program was at building community that they've already scheduled a repeat blood drive. So where I started with just trying to get a few friends to replenish the blood I used up, we ended up not only getting people to donate blood or run a blood drive, but to have a blood drive program. I'm speaking to an audience that knows the power of a blood drive to build community. You are the leaders of these communities. You see with your own eyes how a group of people can become united through organizing a blood drive. A group of people becomes a community, making a difference. At a drive held at my daughter's school, the very site of the accident, I might add, the organizers did some amazing things. They scheduled a drive to occur at the same day as a dance show that was also being held. So not only did people come to donate blood, but members of the dance show audience came by before and after the show to give blood as well. So turnout was tremendous. There were some other great stories I heard about that drive. For example, one of the donors was a math teacher who donated while sharing the news that his wife was an emergency room nurse, and she had been one of the triage nurses who had worked on me the day I first came to the ER. There were also a few parents who didn't make the minimum weight requirement. So they tried to park themselves at the food table and eat enough cookies to gain a few pounds to get in on the action. And there were teachers who came to the blood drive just to tell stories about the kids while the parents waited in line to donate. So the blood drives were a success, both in terms of the blood raised and the communities built. By the end of May, I came home from the hospital in a wheelchair, and I continued to receive months of physical therapy and nursing care. I want to go off on a tangent for a moment and just mention, for anyone who's never been in a wheelchair before, you should try it for a day or even a week. It is really eye-opening. It's hard to get in or out anywhere. It's hard to reach things, hard to hear people at a cocktail party. You can't go visit a friend's house unless you know you won't need the bathroom while you're there. Forget the stairs or the escalator. You can't pick something up off the floor easily, and you're stuck if something's blocking you that you can't maneuver. Going down a hill is terrifying, and going up a hill is exhausting, unless someone else is pushing the chair, in which case it's exhausting for them. And every time I went to a restaurant and told them I brought my own chair, my poor wife could only roll her eyes, as she must endure with every other joke I repeat. I took tons of medicine too. I had pills for pain, antibiotics, and iron, and vitamins. My kids memorized the names of my pills, and they helped me remember to take them. At one time, though, I had refilled my pill box with all my medications, and it slipped out of my hand and fell. At almost 30 pills a day, that's about 200 pills, I had to pick up off the floor from my wheelchair and account for one by one by one. That's not easy in a wheelchair. The good news is I'm now down to about 100 pills a week, and eventually that will all go away. But this recovery is still a process. By the way, while I'm on the subject of pills, I also want to take an aside to mention publicly I'm still on a few antidepressants, stemming from some post-trauma-related anxiety. Why do I want to state it publicly? Because we unfortunately live in a society where people sometimes feel ashamed to admit that they have mental health needs. Neither do their friends, nor their physicians, nor themselves. Antidepressants can do help, and to anyone who feels unusually sad, you should get help. Don't be ashamed. See a medical professional. Take medication if you should, and don't suffer. I learned all about the world of prosthetics. I heard they were really expensive, so I started looking on eBay for my first set. I then learned that it doesn't work that way. But thankfully I have good insurance, and my prosthetist built me a set of legs, and slowly but surely I gained my strength back and learned to walk. First with a walker and then with a cane. And last week I left the house for the first time without a wheelchair, walker, or cane. Then my physical therapist told me that wasn't safe, so I'm back to walking with a cane. But I think I walk pretty well, considering it's only been about 3 weeks since I got both my legs. In 1 year's time, I am planning on running the New York Marathon. Let me offer some closing thoughts. My blood type, as I mentioned, is B positive, which may be, if I'm calculating right, about 20 people in this room also have. As kids, my brothers and I used to joke that when my mom heard we got a B+, she nudged us to work a little harder on our grades. But let me leave you instead with a different message having to do with my blood type, B positive. Be positive. Make something good come out of something bad. We all go through tough times in life, in our work, families, hurricanes, and so forth. Be positive. You've each run blood drives where something might have gone wrong. Maybe a luncheon has to get moved because of a storm. You know that hundreds of blood drives were canceled due to the hurricane, but you must be positive. For example, for me, it was a unique and wonderful feeling to be able to empty my sock drawer and give away most of my socks to Goodwill. That's how you make something good come out of something bad. I began my remarks today by saying I would tell you my entire life's story. But thanks to you and people like you, that story is not yet finished. Thank you.